Okay, so continuing here, if we have a but between criminal law and sincerely held religious beliefs, almost always criminal law is going to win that competition. Let's talk for a moment about defamation. Defamation is, of course, damaging one's reputation through false statements. There are some things the Supreme Court says are simply not protected speech. It is speech, but it's not protected. Defamation is one of them. When you lie about other people, whether it's in writing, which is called libel, or verbally, which is called slander, you will be accountable for it. In the 1960s, the Supreme Court came up with a rule. We'll talk more about this in our torch chapter, chapter 12, saying that if you are a public person, then you have a higher bar to get over to prove defamation than regular people. Okay, let's talk for a moment about, let's talk about due process of law. Under the Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, we are entitled to the government treating us with due process of law. We're also entitled under the Constitution to equal protection of law. And while we're entitled to those things, the point that the textbook wants to make more than anything is that there's a balance between the compelling interest in government to do what it's assigned to do and your protection under due process of law and equal protection of law. Let me give you an example from the 1930s. In the 1920s and 30s, there was a highly communicable airborne disease in the United States called tuberculosis, and many people were getting it. It was almost 100% fatal. And back in the 1920s and 30s, when someone was found to have tuberculosis, they were put forever into a tuberculosis asylum. They were put away, and they could never come out of that asylum. And you're saying, well, doesn't that take away their rights without due process? Absolutely it does. What was the compelling governmental interest? To save the rest of society from catching this very transmittable disease. So the more compelling the argument of government to save society, the more it can take away your due process rights. Okay, let's go over here uh, to mention state interest. Generally, your constitutional rights can be violated by the government or the state. The term is called state interest. Usually your rights can't be violated, your constitutional rights can't be violated by people, but by the state. And so the state can, for example, cannot say, for example, well, you can't park in this public parking lot because you're female. Well, that's the state acting, and that involves state actions. Whereas your Aunt Minnie can say, I don't allow anyone to park in my driveway except males. She can do that because she's not the state. One more thing here, and that is, let me find it here for you. Oh, the one other thing I wanted to mention is that the Constitution can be amended to say anything. The Constitution is the basic law of the land, and it can be amended, and that most recent amendment will always take precedence over the text of the Constitution or the previous amendments. To take a bizarre example, could the Constitution be amended to say that a Soviet-style dictatorship will be implemented in the United States, and you are the life dictator? Yes, it can be amended to say that, because that latest amendment trumps all of the previous amendments. Can it be amended to say that the half of the gross national product of the United States must be spent every year by the government to build a rocket to put a dog in to send to the planet Jupiter? Yes, as silly as that amendment is, it takes precedence over all the previous amendments. That's it. That's chapter 5.